Isn't it always a wonderful moment when we know we're going to have an amazing evening and we're just getting started? So my name is Carolyn Bridget Flynn, and I'm here to welcome you. I have a huge honor of introducing Deena tonight. And since I've known her almost 40 years and met her as a little pup, it's amazing to be here tonight for me. I want to just say a couple quick things. We are videotaping, so just be aware in terms of noise and that kind of thing. And make sure your cell phones are off and no flash photography, that kind of thing. Great. Deena had a vision that this reading would happen at the Wende Museum right here. And she wasn't entirely certain why, but she had a very clear vision, was able to actually get this date and have this event. And we would love to, Deena would love to have you, Siegel, who's the chief curator and director of programming here, just to tell us all a little bit about this museum. Welcome, Yus.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this might be a little higher at the moment. Oh, perfect.
There you go.
Yeah, it's even easier. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I want to say that it is a real privilege and huge pleasure to welcome Deena here tonight at the Wende Museum. And for a very special reason. For those of you who don't know the museum, it is a collection, quite unique collection of more than 100,000 items, artwork and artifacts from the socialist countries worldwide during the Cold War period. And we use this collection for exhibitions that are experimental, but that also try to make a meaningful connection between the past and the present. And one of the ways we are doing that is that we always invite contemporary artists to share their perspective on the topics we present and to make this topical relevance clear in their work. And I would say that Deena fits the bill perfectly because she's also a contemporary artist who does exactly that, making very pertinent and meaningful, significant connections between past and present. And that is absolutely very clear in this book, The Story That Must Not Be Told, which is a very confusing title to me because it's a story that must be told. Sure. It's a very important story, and I won't say anything about the content because you will hear about that. But I would like to say that two metaphors came into my head while reading it. One was an onion. The book reads like an onion because it's peeling off layer after layer that brings you closer to the essence of her story, that is very much steeped in a very problematic but still very relevant history. The other metaphor is quite the opposite, that's the metaphor of a sculpture, because this book also reads like a central body that adds details and adds elements while reading, and that becomes richer and richer. I was very impressed by this book. I think it's a perfect fit for the Wende Museum. I feel honored, Deena, that you chose the Wende Museum to present your work here, and I'm sure we are going to have an unforgettable evening. Thank you.
So, almost 40 years ago, I drove up Topanga Canyon Road to someone I kind of knew, and I went to her writing class, and that was the night that everything changed in my life. And I have a feeling that there are many on the planet, many people who can say the same thing. I have a feeling there are some of us in this room who can say the same thing. So what an honor to be able to celebrate with Deena this newest book. And I love the idea of the onion because you'll see as you read it, Deena has been, as a writer, she's been experimenting with the idea that the writer herself becomes a character in the books, right? So suddenly the writer is telling you what she's doing and then you're back to the characters. And she's been doing this for a while now, it's part of her motif. In this one, the writer is absolutely a character, and the entire process is on the page. We're learning things as we turn the page, as the writer was learning things and writing the book. So it's a fascinating structure just that way. So some of you maybe haven't met Deena or don't know her. I don't know that there are many, but Deena is a poet, a novelist, an essayist, a storyteller, teacher, healer, and medicine woman. She has taught and counseled for over 50 years. This book is set in 1973, or part of it, she begins in there. So that's her career spans 50 years. And there's ways in which the story that must not be told tells a good part of Deena's 50 years. So it's a wonderful record in that way as well. So in addition to being the teacher and the healer and the storyteller and the life changer for so many people, she's a prolific writer. 13 published books, a multitude of essays, poetry. I want to mention that out there, in addition to our current book, we've got some others for sale, but she is the author of A Reign of Nightbirds, La Negra y Blanca, which won the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award for Excellence in Literature, Pharaoh, Ruin and Beauty, The Other Hand, Tree, Essays and Pieces, and on and on. So her work has changed many people's lives, and this book is just going to keep going out there and keep doing it. So I'm so thrilled to welcome our dear one, Deena Metzger.
This is a different kind of book than I've ever written. And it's a grave book. And so I'd like to begin in a different way. I'd like to ask you to spend with me a minute of silence so that we can be still inside ourselves to hear what I didn't want to write, and we don't want to hear, but we must. I didn't want to write this book, and I couldn't imagine that I could write it because I was being asked to write the story of someone who I didn't remember and somehow had met 50 years ago, but I didn't remember. But her brother came to visit me, and he insisted that I would write this book, which is completely mysterious, because the story that I'm telling is his story. And maybe one day he will reveal to us why he wanted it told. And that will also be a very interesting mystery. As was said, the book proceeds in a process of discovery. So I would learn something and write it, and then I'd learn something else, and then I would write it, and then I'd have some assumptions, and sometimes I'd be wrong. And so you're going to get that too, where I'm going to say something, and then later on I'm going to say, no, that's not the way it was. Ultimately, I have to say the book is written because Ina Andre wanted it told. And she is the ghost. And I think after you read the book, you will have no doubt that she is a ghost. And that she insisted on this. She wanted us to know, or maybe I have to say she wants us to know, what it is like to be so agonized by what one's ancestors did that she couldn't bear living, that she took her own life. What does it mean to have such understanding and shame about the unconscionable behavior of one's grandparents and great-grandparents, that one takes one's own life, but 50 years later is determined to tell the story? What her ancestors did was support Hitler's regime as industrialists at the core of the war effort. The reason it is so important that we hear Ina's story is that the times we are living, the action of the regime that we live within, are frighteningly similar to the times of her ancestors. We will be the ancestors of the descendants who, if they manage to survive or to live, will look back to discover what we did and how we lived. This is a time of gravitas as we have never known. Such a time killed Ina after the fact. So, what is strange for me personally is that Ina the ghost seems to have chosen me to tell this story. Somehow she knew I would, and I did. So here are a few of the threads that I'm going to read to you from the book. It is layered, and you're going to get not quite a straight line, but some line through it, but I think you'll have some understanding of it. When you read the book, one of the things that you'll see is that there are some lines that are in red. All her paintings, well, not all her paintings, but so many of her paintings were in red. And so I'm wearing red to honor that. But there are places in the book where I underline things in red because I want you to see. I want to make sure you don't miss those lines. So, this is how it begins. Dear Wolfgang, her brother, you asked for a story. Or maybe Ina asked, or maybe Ina is asking. If so, we must not refuse the dead. Here is the story. It isn't once upon a time because it really happened. Nevertheless, it is a story. And the story occurs when all the events are gathered in a sphere as opposed to being laid out in a straight timeline. And then what happened converts through all the parts relating to each other to reveal everything, including what is being hidden, including the meaning of these events. The writer received an email from a stranger in the summer of 2022 when we were still involved in the pandemic. His name was Wolfgang, and she thought immediately of Velvo or Wolf, who were a single character in her play Dreams Against the State, who don't matter to the story, but they do. Velvo, a spirit who inhabited Wolf, the character, was the last survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. Sometimes when Wolf appeared on the stage, Velvo, like a boiling geyser, would emerge from him and take over. He carried a bag of bones, cleaned of flesh at Auschwitz, but not spirit. They belonged to his wife, daughter, and son. He dug into the sack, pulled out a bone, and admired it. Then he spoke to the audience and to his daughter. Look at this bone. It's my Rachel. How beautiful you are. The throwing of the bones was a different kind of divination used to awaken the agony of memory. Wolfgang Andre was writing to her from Germany because he was investigating the circumstances of his sister Ina's death and thought the writer might be able to shed light upon it. It needed light because it was a dark death, self-imposed, a suicide carefully planned and tested before it was realized, dark in the middle of the dark night so it could be hidden. But so this time, the suicide would succeed. I wrote back politely that I didn't remember a sister and couldn't enlighten him. He said he would be visiting in the winter and asked if he could see me anyway. The writer couldn't refuse a man mourning for his sister, so she agreed. Each knew nothing of the true reasons for Ina's death. They had to discover it between them, between us. As if Ina had just come to life to do the deed, the suicide happening again and again. He had been come that winter. Later, he said he had had a heart attack, a mild injury to the heart. She understood immediately he had had heartbreak. Then when he wrote again, she reminded him that she had no memories of his sister whatsoever, but he persisted. Months later, he did arrive in California. As he was making his way to her door, she realized as she saw his shadow stretching toward her across the bricks that she had imagined a young man, and so she was surprised to see a tall, almost elderly man approach her door. The appearance of the older man added gravity to their meeting. What remained strange was that it was 2024, and he was investigating the death of his sister in 1975. He wanted to honor her and create a little book about her work. It was as if he had just lost his sister and was mourning her while trying to understand what had occurred that had led to her death. The writer accommodated him. As they spoke, she began to understand that he did not ever consider being as affected as his sister had been about the circumstances which led to her death. It had never occurred to him that Ina's field of inquiry could have been his as well. As a consequence, Ina's concerns became the writer's. Then slowly And inevitably, Wolfgang seemed to be drawn into a story he hadn't known was his. Investigation became soul-searching. It was disorienting. It was disconcerting. Most of what could or should have been in the open in order to understand had not been seen as consequential at first, or had been avoided or hidden. Then history had appeared unexpectedly. It had to be reckoned with. What was the writer to do? Not remembering the sister and having no idea whatsoever what had led to her death, she originally thought she could offer Wolfgang an understanding of the social and political milieu that his sister Ina had entered when she came to the United States from Germany to join the feminist studio workshop at the Women's Building as an artist. Maybe the impact of the two cultures had affected Ina. Maybe the wild and radical changes introduced by feminism had disturbed her. The tiny house where the writer lived was in a rural area at the end of an unpaved road of rocks, dirt, and gravel. You really had to want to reach the house to navigate it. Because she was a writer, her lifestyle was casual. She had no desire to serve in a formal way or to be served, and then perhaps what interested Ina about the woman, for Ina had been longing for social and educational institutions without hierarchy, and was pained by any display of rank or privilege, even teacher-student. Perhaps this was because she had been born into a life of advantage, and as we will discover, but not in time to save Ina's life, a life sustained by ill-gotten gains. The Feminist Studio Workshop was not simply an educational institution. It was established simultaneously with the Women's Building, the two together becoming a cultural event and a sanctuary for young women in particular who could not thrive in the dominant culture no more than Ina could flourish within the formalities and restrictions of her German family. The goal of cultural feminism was for women's cultures and values, the unique woman's voice, the feminine, the feminist, to influence society and its institutions in ethical ways. That is, to undo patriarchy. The second wave of feminism in Los Angeles was a tsunami, but not one in which Ina would have drowned. As it turned out, it was her past, that is her family's past and history, that took her down. Wolfgang Micheline, his wife, and the writer are speaking amicably about Ina. This is the first visit. More than 2 hours have passed. This may be the time that Wolfgang says casually that Ina had not wanted to take her grandmother's money when she was studying in Dusseldorf, where she taught English to support herself. However, she had no choice but to accept it when she came to the U.S. and the Feminist Studio Workshop. Why didn't she want to take her grandmother's money? It was her grandmother's inheritance from Blumenvos. What is Blumenvos? Blumenvos was the largest military, shipbuilding, and engineering company in Germany, once the largest in the world. They also became an aircraft manufacturing company aligned with Messerschmitt under Hitler. Long silence. Then, as if another question had been asked, yes, she tried to commit suicide by jumping off a dock right next to Blumenvos, dressed elegantly with a bouquet of flowers in her hand. It was 1968 or 69. Ina came to Los Angeles in 1974 and committed suicide in 1975 at a remote outcropping in Death Valley, alone. I knew that we had to get red roses for tonight. I didn't know why, but I just knew that we had. And when I looked at the paper that wrapped the roses, it said Blomhouse, close enough to Blumenvos to give one shivers about a ghost and what the ghost or the dead want to say to us now. When meeting for the first time, the writer and Wolfgang pondered what they imagined had been the consequences of her experience, first in Hamburg, where she'd been born, then her very difficult high school experiences in Philadelphia with her consul father and mother, then studying art in Hamburg, and living in the staid and formal house of the Blom shipbuilding grandparents. Then her years studying in Dusseldorf. Then she had come to Los Angeles, but it had not saved her. No reasons were given at the outset to consider anything but personal circumstances for the suicide, in the way that psychology fails to understand the impact of social, political, and historic circumstances. The original focus was on Ina's anguish over family values and attitudes based on patriarchy, privilege, and wealth, and equally commonplace family dysfunction and or the overwhelming pressures of ambition or achievement which the family as well as the faculty and students of the FSW held dearly. To rule it out, she seemed not to have experienced sexual abuse or physical violence, though her mother had a mean tongue. Still, it did not seem to the writer that Ina's suicide was directly related to psychological difficulties with her mother, even while acknowledging that Ina had committed suicide on her mother's birthday. Wolfgang and his wife spent a great deal of time speaking to people in Los Angeles and California, wherever they could meet someone that had once known Ina, but they never found out anything that enlightened them. And so it was left to the two of us, the brother who had been quite removed from her, and I, the writer, who did not remember her at all, to see if we could understand what had driven her after 3 earlier suicide rehearsals to finally end her life. Did the ghost perceive that the writer would take on this task, and perhaps no one else would dare to get to the truth of it? Is this why the ghost had directed the brother to find, by whatever means he could, to have the writer write the text? And so, in August 2024, he wrote, "I hope to find you well. We had a busy summer. Our elder son married in September, but now I want to push the Ina story ahead. Will you have time for your book project we talked about? I hope so. Kind regards, Wolfgang." In one of several of our conversations, I suggested that I might not be writing this piece on behalf of Ina, but actually, on behalf of Wolfgang, that this was one form of his amends for his great-grandfather and his grandparents, and I don't know who else. So after he had told me about Blom and Vos, he left and I did what anyone would do. I went to the computer and I looked up Blom and Vos in Wikipedia. And there, the Nazi era, 1933 to 1945. When Hermann Blom died in 1930, his two sons, Rudolf Blom and Walter Blom, had taken over in 1918. Ernest Vos had left long before. By this time in 1930, the company was in financial crisis, so the Blom brothers diversified into aircraft. With the rise of the Nazi Party to power in 1933, Germany began to rearm, and both companies became increasingly involved in the program. The shipyard built both civilian craft and warships for the government, including the battleship Bismarck, before manufacturing U-boats in quantity. And this, if you read the book, you'll find in red. In 1944, a subcamp of Neuengamme concentration camp was set up at the company's shipyard in Hamburg. It supplied labor to the company from October 1944 to April 1945. In 1972, I had gone to Chile, where the writer had witnessed the people's enthusiasm for the democratically elected social government of Salvador Allende. It was becoming obvious then that a revolt was beginning against Allende, incited and financed by the United States through the efforts of Henry Kissinger, who nevertheless was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973, while simultaneously being accused of being a war criminal in many ad hoc trials. These circumstances, in my view, being paralleled by the indicted felon who has been elected president and constantly threatens international violence while himself publicly longing for the Nobel Peace Prize. On April 27, 2025, Stacey Torres wrote in The Guardian, quote, it's the title of it, I used to laugh at my Chilean father's paranoia about the U.S., not anymore, in which he parallels the swift development of the brutal coup by General Pinochet with similar activities in the United States. The writer was writing I again and pulled back perhaps to give her words authority because this matters so much to me, to her. I don't want you to think for one moment that this story, which is a fiction, is a fiction. As I hold Germans responsible for Hitlerism in 1933, I think we, as Americans, must take responsibility for the current rise of Hitlerism in the United States, which we may ultimately call Trumpism. What was so unnerving, distressing, there are no words for it, is as I followed, because I had to in the stories, I followed the history of the rise of Hitler from being appointed chancellor in 1933, the parallels to contemporary times. They can't be denied. So, here's a letter that Deena wrote before she committed suicide. She wrote it to the first woman who she met at the Women's Building, Sheila Ruth. It gives you some sense of what it's like in such a mind, at such a moment. Hello, Sheila Ruth. I'm happy to be writing to you since you were the first woman I met from the building and from the workshop. It was a hot, dusty day, and I was very depressed. The moment I want to tell you about was the moment when I jumped off the bridge in Hamburg, the freedom, the eternity, power. Total disinterest in the world, the people diving deep, dirty water, no memory, up again, losing shoe, clutching purse, drifting underneath bridge, don't care what happens, hopeless, hapless, boat, big, scramble looking, people dressed, blue dress, boat, lifesaver, they pull me in. I'm not grateful. I'm nothing. Sit on the edge, rock, cement, ambulance, siren. Why did you do it? Say nothing. Harbor, hospital, neon, derelict, large, whitish room, stuck in bed. Grandmother comes and said she had to take a whole lot of Baldrian. Go home. Wet, purse, exam, old English grammar at 4. The grandmother Louise came and complained that she had to take a whole lot of Baldrian, Valerian, and then she went home. No surprise. She's Louise Andre's wife of Max Andre, whose first wife had been Ina Blom. The end of May 1975, Ina tries the letter again. So this is the third draft. Dear Sheila Ruth, this is my third attempt at a letter to you, and I can't say it's getting any easier at all. Here I am, Sunday night, tired enough to permit myself to go to sleep instantly, but keeping awake because I dread the perspective of waking up tomorrow morning knowing I didn't do it after all that worrying and not dealing, or rather being afraid to deal with. The moment when the cab stops in the harbor, when I scrambled out, a black cab in Hamburg, I've given the driver a 5 marks coin in advance that includes a fat tip. I turn and run. It is a hot, crowded day, shortly before 1. I am here again. Looks different. The last time yesterday was Sunday, and the old man with the sailor's cap was there. Excuse me. And he gave me a sweet liqueur and said, no, he wouldn't tell me how they had done it here. One never knew. And he looked at me. People come here and do things, he said. And he shook his head. And it was peaceful when I sat down on the bench behind his cabin, a cabin surrounded by water, the dirty, oily water of Hamburg's LB. Hamburg's industry, Hamburg's lungs, that breeze to the ocean, the only water of freighters and tugboats, hooting and bustling freighters, steamships, warships, ships first imperial, then Republican ships, then with swastikas, now international. Whoever pays best. Ships built by my family, my grandmother's name Blom, looming hundreds of feet high on top of the scaffolding. But her name was Ina. Ina, like mine like hers, Ina, not Blom, or was it the same? Blom up high above the huge construction on the other side of the river, when the ship changes, hundreds of sweaty men in dark denims cross over on ships, crowd up the passageway and disappear into the subway tunnel. Blown. The moment has just begun. It's a covered bridge, turquoise blue on the outside, oddly curved. At the end of it, a visiting American destroyer open today for the public to inspect and admire the strength and perfection of our powerful ally. I am running. It is a bright day. Dusty slabs of sidewalk cement, and then the shadow and the wooden planks of the bridge. I stop short. People, sailors, mothers with children, strollers. I could not wait in line any longer. I had worked on it for weeks, pored over the book, carving phrases laboriously, with a mind too numb to tell the difference between chapters, taking a sentence, changing the verb to make it sound different, staring at the line, turning the page, picking up the verb, waiting to be called to lunch, dinner, refusing the blue bow, stuck in my hair from behind. Why do you always dress so dark? And what a hot day. And would you get the napkins? I move slowly, pale, withdrawn, my hair tied back. Can I help? I lift the tea cart onto the veranda, just one end of it, though I could never hold both ends without spilling something. Grandfather comes, and grandmother, not Ina. She died long ago. He has fine, smooth hands. He peels a pear. Maybe it's breakfast. He does that for breakfast or for dessert. I sit and stare, and they talk around me. I wish I could be entertaining, could think of something to say, but it's numb and gray, and they talk around me, smile at me, and would you like some more potatoes? And they talk about newspapers, reports, the garden. Grandfather stares ahead in the distance, in the past. Business for the company. And all the Sundays spent when Ina was alive, having formal dinners with her parents, the Bloms. And I am 20 now. Who knows? I put back the napkins, bring grandfather his vermouth, stare into the garden. The bushes are green and cheerful, and everybody sighs, what a nice day. And I go up the 2 stories to my room. I was stopped short, and I am again here on the bridge. This is the moment, running from the cab. The man coming towards me is too far away, and the woman with the child has just passed me. It is safe. I dash to the left, climb onto the railing. 1 second, a glimpse, and the rest is mine. Ina writes this in May 1975. 7 years after this dramatic attempt at erasing her name by erasing herself from Blown and Vos. She's been staying in Hamburg with her grandfather, P. Max Andre, director of Blown and Vos, and his second wife, Louise. His first wife had been Ina, her namesake, the daughter of Herman Blohm, who founded Blown and Vos. So the book proceeds. Her 3 suicide attempts are described. The determination that she has to be able to speak when she's unable to speak becomes clear, and we come to the end of the book. But it can't end. And as you'll see in reading it, that I'd be writing it and something would happen in the United States, and I'd have to put that in. And then something would happen, and I'd have to put that in. And so I wrote an afterword. I, Deena Metzger, the actual writer, and not the character in this book, who sometimes can't avoid speaking in first person, am writing this. I'm writing this afterward because the time we are in mirror the fall of the Weimar Republic and the rise of the Nazi state. This text becomes outdated week by week, though we will attempt to update it as best as we can before publication. The various references and quotes indicate how someone may read about us 80 years from now, if someone survives. I was in Berlin, East and West, in April 1989, just before the wall came down. There was still rubble in the streets. The Weimar Republic was the German state from 1918 to 1933, during which it was a constitutional republic for the first time in history. According to Timothy W. Ryback, writing in The Atlantic, January 2025, Justice Trump was inaugurated as President of the United States. Quote, Hitler dismantled the democracy in 53 days. 92 years ago this month, on Monday morning, January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed the 15th Chancellor of the Weimar Republic. In one of the most astonishing political transformations in the history of democracy, Hitler set about destroying the constitutional republic through constitutional means. Hitler systematically disabled and then dismantled his country's democratic structures and processes in less than 2 months' time, specifically 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours, and 40 minutes. In my own country, which has been a democratic nation since 1775, the current elected president has been in power since January 20th, 2025. That is nearly 33 days as I first write these words, and just 4 to 5 months as I conclude them. He has, like Hitler, been governing by fiat, by executive orders, through rulings resonant with those once enacted to assure the rise of Nazism. At the precise time of this whirlwind of chaos and devastation, enter Ina Andre. Her true presence is undeniable. It is mind-breaking. She gave her life for our consciousness, but could not rest until we became aware of the meaning of her death. So she returns at a time when this awareness is critical. She took her own life, and she offers back to us. She is alive among us here. She calls us to make appropriate amends for the crimes of our ancestors, to cease our own criminal behavior and crimes against humanity and genocide, and to refuse to cooperate with either national or international criminal behavior. Her activity is precise. I don't think she's desperate. I think she is determined. Might this imply that there is a sliver of hope if we listen from our hearts and act determinedly from the heart? Thank you for reading this book. Thank you for reading it.
I'm going to facilitate Q&A, but I kind of want to cry, so
would just take a moment and
Yes,
let it settle. The book has a lot of the parallels, so it's not just words that I'm saying. These are words that I'm saying in response to the evidence. So, there's a person standing there. Do you want to come in and sit down?
there's a moment when Deena, is this on? Can you hear me? When Deena talked about what this book means in terms of what Ina might be telling us. And she said it has to do with atonement and it has to do with a warning. And so here we are standing inside the question of atonement and how we live with a warning from a ghost. And what it is to be handed something that you didn't ask for and really said no to several times, and then finally say yes. And Deena says one of the reasons she ultimately said yes to writing this book was that Trump got elected. And suddenly this country is, I imagine I'm not the only one to say, unrecognizable, and all that she describes. So we would love to hear and create some space for people to ask questions, maybe give reflections on where this takes you. You know, we have, I think we have about 20 minutes, which is a nice bit of time. But we would love to hear from any questions that you have for Deena, any reflections, any thoughts. Part of it is how do we carry this? Wasn't that something I just want to say? To hear her read Ina's voice, that was amazing.